I knew something was wrong, long before anyone else did. It started with a burning sensation deep in my chest, the kind that felt as though someone had wrapped steel wires around my lungs and pulled tighter with every breath. I tried to ignore it, because that was what I had spent my entire life doing. In my family, pain was never taken seriously unless it happened to someone else. If I complained, I was dramatic. If I cried, I was looking for attention. If I got sick, it was always somehow my fault. So when I felt my breathing change that Saturday afternoon, I told myself it would pass. It didn't. The backyard buzzed with conversation as relatives laughed over barbecue, and children chased each other across the lawn. My parents were celebrating their 30th wedding anniversary, and they had invited nearly everyone they knew. Every table was decorated with white flowers and framed photographs of happier times. My mother had spent weeks making sure every detail looked perfect. Appearances meant everything to her. I carried a tray of drinks toward the patio while smoke drifted from the grill. The first breath made me cough. The second made my throat tighten. By the third, I couldn't fill my lungs. I stopped walking and pressed a hand against my chest. "Dad," I whispered. He looked over briefly without standing. "What now?" I can't breathe." Several relatives turned toward me before quickly looking away again. My father sighed loudly enough for everyone to hear. "Not today, Emma." "I'm serious." He rolled his eyes. "You always find a way to make every family event about yourself." The words hit almost as hard as the pain, squeezing my lungs. My mother glanced across the yard, noticed several guests watching, and forced a smile. "Sweetheart," she said through clenched teeth, "stop making a scene." "I'm not." "You've always been anxious. Go sit inside for a few minutes." I tried to answer, but only a rasp escaped my throat. The air wouldn't come. Every breath felt smaller than the last. I stumbled toward the back door, hoping the cool air inside would help, but my legs suddenly became weak. The tray slipped from my hands. Glasses shattered across the patio. The noise finally made everyone stop talking. Instead of rushing over, my father shook his head. "For heaven's sake." My mother looked embarrassed rather than concerned. "Now look what you've done." I wanted to explain. I wanted to tell them I wasn't pretending. Instead, I dropped to one knee. The world around me blurred. Someone screamed. Footsteps rushed toward me. Strong hands guided me away from the smoke. "Emma, look at me." The voice wasn't familiar. A man wearing jeans and a blue button-down shirt knelt beside me. He checked my pulse, watched my breathing. His calm expression disappeared instantly. "When did this start?" I couldn't answer. My chest refused to cooperate. He looked directly at my parents. "Call an ambulance." My father laughed. "She's having another panic attack." The stranger didn't move. I said, "Call an ambulance." My mother folded her arms. "She's done this before." "No," he replied firmly, "she hasn't." His confidence silenced the yard. He pulled a small flashlight from his pocket and checked my eyes before listening carefully to every strained breath I fought to take. His face became pale. He reached for his phone. "I'm calling 911. "You don't need to do that," my father snapped. The man ignored him completely. "My name is Dr. Nathan Carter," he told the dispatcher. "I'm attending a private event. 26-year-old female. Severe respiratory distress, difficulty speaking. Cyanosis beginning around the lips. Send advanced life support immediately." My mother's face lost its color. "Doctor?" Nathan nodded without looking at her. "Yes." My father's confidence vanished. He stepped closer. "Is it really that serious?" Nathan slowly lifted his eyes. If the ambulance had waited another 10 minutes because everyone assumed she was pretending. He never finished the sentence. He didn't have to. The silence that followed terrified everyone, including me. For the first time in my life, I saw fear on my father's face. Real fear. Not because I was suffering, because he suddenly realized he might have been wrong. The sirens arrived within minutes. Paramedics surrounded me with practiced urgency. An oxygen mask covered my face. Monitors beeped around me. Someone asked questions I couldn't answer. Nathan answered them instead. I witnessed the onset. Parents delayed emergency response. Patient unable to complete sentences. Rapid respiratory decline. Each statement sounded colder than the last. My mother's hands trembled. We thought. The paramedic interrupted gently. We'll discuss that later. As they lifted me onto the stretcher, I looked toward my parents. Neither moved. Neither reached for me. Neither apologized. My father simply stared. Like he was trying to convince himself this couldn't possibly be happening. The ambulance doors closed. The siren drowned out everything else. Inside the vehicle, oxygen finally began easing the pressure in my chest, but my heartbeat still raced uncontrollably. One paramedic squeezed my shoulder. "You're safe now." Those 3 words nearly made me cry save. It wasn't something I had ever associated with my own family. The emergency department exploded into motion the second we arrived. Doctors, nurses, respiratory therapists, machines, questions, medication. Everything blurred together. No one accused me of exaggerating. No one rolled their eyes. No one suggested I wanted attention. Every single person treated my breathing as though it mattered. Because it did. After several breathing treatments and blood tests, my oxygen levels slowly improved. The pressure eased enough that I could finally speak. A young nurse smiled warmly. "How are you feeling?" "Tired. I imagine." She hesitated. "Were your parents always like that?" The question caught me off guard. I almost defended them automatically. I stopped. For years I had explained away everything they did. Dad's just stressed. Mom worries about appearances. They're trying their best. But sitting in a hospital bed with an IV in my arm, those excuses suddenly sounded hollow. "I don't know," I whispered. The nurse gave me a sympathetic smile. "You don't have to answer." An hour later, Dr. Nathan Carter knocked softly before entering my room. He had changed into hospital scrubs. "I wanted to check on you. You work here?" He nodded. "Pulmonologist." That explained everything. "You saved me." He shook his head. "The paramedics did. If you hadn't called." He remained silent. Sometimes silence says more than words. He pulled a chair beside the bed. "I need to ask you something." I nodded. "When you said your parents thought you were pretending," I looked away. "They always think that." His expression tightened. "Always?" I laughed quietly. It wasn't a happy laugh. When I broke my wrist at 13, Dad said I was trying to skip piano lessons. When I fainted during high school track practice, Mom said I wanted attention. When I had food poisoning in college, they accused me of being lazy because I missed dinner. Nathan didn't interrupt. "They've never believed me." For several seconds, he simply stared at the floor. Finally, he spoke. "Emma, yeah. I reviewed your initial test results." Something in his voice changed. Professional, careful, measured. My stomach tightened. "What is it?" There are signs this wasn't simply a panic attack. My heartbeat accelerated again. "What do you mean?" "We found inflammation in your airways that needs further investigation." "Is it serious?" He hesitated. "I don't want to speculate until more tests come back." My fingers gripped the hospital blanket. "But," he looked directly into my eyes, "I do want to know something." "What? How many times has something like this happened before?" Memories flooded back instantly, the coughing fits after mowing the lawn, the wheezing every spring, the nights I slept sitting upright because lying flat made breathing harder, the countless times I'd been told I was overreacting, the countless times I'd believed them. I swallowed hard, more times than I can count. Nathan slowly leaned back. He didn't say another word. He didn't need to. The concern on his face was enough. For the first time, I wondered whether the biggest lie my parents had ever told me wasn't that I was dramatic. It was that I was healthy. And judging by the silence filling that hospital room, the doctor had just realized something that terrified him. I couldn't stop staring at Dr. Carter's face. Doctors learn to hide emotion. I'd heard that before. They train themselves to stay calm so patients don't panic. But despite all that training, something about my test results had unsettled him enough that he couldn't completely mask it. "I'd like to order a CT scan and some additional pulmonary testing," he said gently. "I don't want you going home until we know exactly what's happening." I nodded, still trying to process everything. An hour later, my phone began vibrating. "Mom." I ignored it. Dad called immediately afterward. Then my older brother, Jason. Finally, a text appeared. "Your mother is crying. You embarrassed us in front of everyone. Call home." Asterisk. I stared at the message until the words blurred together. Not one person had asked how I was feeling. Not one. They wanted damage control. Nothing more. Another message arrived from my mother. Asterisk, "Please tell everyone it wasn't serious. People are talking." I laughed, but it came out sounding more like a sob. A nurse noticed my expression. "You don't have to answer." She reached over and quietly placed my phone face down on the bedside table. "Right now," she said, "your only job is getting better." No one had ever given me permission to put myself first. It felt strangely unfamiliar. The CT scan happened later that evening. The machine hummed around me while I tried to stay perfectly still. Every minute felt like an hour. When I returned to my room, exhaustion finally caught up with me. I drifted into an uneasy sleep. The next morning, I woke to quiet voices outside my door. Results are consistent. Years of untreated symptoms could have become life-threatening. I recognized Dr. Carter's voice. Then another physician answered. If she'd waited much longer yesterday. The rest faded as they walked away. My stomach tightened. A few minutes later, Dr. Carter entered carrying a folder. He sat beside my bed. "I have your results." I took a slow breath. "We found evidence of chronic asthma that appears to have gone undiagnosed for years." I blinked. "Asthma?" "Not mild asthma." He paused. "Severe inflammatory asthma." I couldn't speak. "It explains the repeated coughing, wheezing, chest tightness, and episodes you've experienced over the years." "But," I swallowed, "my parents always said I was pretending." He looked down briefly before meeting my eyes again. "Emma," his voice softened, "you weren't pretending. You were surviving." The tears came instantly. Years of doubt, years of guilt, years of wondering whether something was wrong with me. Gone in a single sentence. Dr. Carter continued carefully. "Yesterday's smoke exposure triggered a severe asthma attack. Without immediate treatment, the outcome could have been very different." I closed my eyes. My parents hadn't ignored a dramatic daughter. They had ignored a real medical emergency. The realization hurt more than the diagnosis itself. Later that afternoon, my parents finally arrived. They walked into the room, carrying flowers and forced smiles. My mother hurried toward me. "Oh, sweetheart." I didn't smile back. Dad cleared his throat. "You scared everyone." I stared at him. "I scared everyone?" He looked uncomfortable. "Well, the doctor said I could have died." Silence. Mom immediately changed the subject. "We've been getting so many phone calls." Dad nodded. "The neighbors are making assumptions." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "I almost died." Mom sighed. "Let's not exaggerate." Before I could answer, Dr. Carter entered. He glanced from me to my parents. "I'm glad you're here." Dad stood. "So she's okay now?" Dr. Carter remained calm. "She is stable. But your daughter has likely been living with untreated severe asthma for many years." Ma frowned. "That can't be right." "It is." Dad folded his arms. "If it was that serious, we'd have known." Dr. Carter looked directly at him. "She told you." The room became painfully quiet. "You dismissed repeated symptoms. You dismissed breathing difficulty. You dismissed chest tightness. You dismissed coughing. You dismissed yesterday's emergency. Each sentence landed heavier than the last. Dad opened his mouth. Nothing came out, Mom finally whispered. We thought she was anxious. Dr. Carter nodded slowly. Anxiety doesn't lower oxygen levels. It doesn't cause inflamed airways. It doesn't respond the way your daughter's lungs responded yesterday. He paused. I've practiced medicine for nearly 20 years. I've seen families panic. I've seen families overreact. What I witnessed yesterday. He stopped. His voice became noticeably quieter. I hope I never witness again. Neither of my parents could look at him, or me. For the first time in my life, they had nothing to say. After they left, I expected to feel victorious. Instead, I felt empty. The people I'd spent my entire life trying to earn love from had almost cost me my own. The next 2 days gave me plenty of time to think. I remembered every time I'd apologized for being sick, every birthday ruined because I had a migraine, every holiday where I forced myself to smile despite struggling to breathe, every accusation that I was lazy, weak, dramatic attention-seeking. None of it had been true. I had simply believed the wrong people. When I was discharged, Dr. Carter handed me a treatment plan, prescriptions, and one final piece of advice. Take your medication, I nodded. And? He smiled gently. Start believing yourself. Those 4 words changed my life more than any prescription ever could. The weeks that followed weren't easy. My parents tried pretending nothing had happened. Mom called, asking if I'd help organize another family gathering. Dad texted wanting assistance updating his business website. Neither apologized. Not really. Eventually, my mother sent a long message. Asterisk, we're sorry you felt unsupported. I read it twice. There was no acknowledgement of what they'd done, only regret that I was upset. For the first time, I didn't answer. Instead, I found a therapist. I learned what gaslighting looked like. I learned why I'd spent years doubting my own body. Most importantly, I learned that love without safety isn't healthy love. 3 months later, I moved into a small apartment across town. It wasn't luxurious, but it was peaceful. No one rolled their eyes if I reached for my inhaler. No one questioned whether I was really sick. Friends checked on me after appointments. Neighbors learned where I kept my emergency medication. People believed me. It still felt strange. 6 months after the anniversary party, my father showed up unexpectedly at my apartment. He looked older, more tired. I've been thinking, he admitted. I waited. He stared at the ground. I keep hearing your words. I can't breathe. His voice cracked. I hear them every night. For the first time, he looked like a man carrying genuine regret. I should have listened. I believed him, but belief and trust aren't the same thing. I forgive you, I said quietly, his eyes filled with hope. But forgiveness doesn't erase what happened. He nodded slowly. I know, I need distance. Another slow nod. I understand. He left without arguing, without making excuses, without blaming me. It was the most honest conversation we'd ever had. A year later, my asthma was well controlled. I had rebuilt my confidence. I stopped apologizing every time my body needed care. Sometimes I still remembered that afternoon. The smoke, the laughter, the moment I whispered that I couldn't breathe. But another memory had become stronger. A doctor kneeling beside me, refusing to ignore what everyone else dismissed, believing me when I couldn't even speak. Looking back now, I realize the biggest turning point in my life wasn't receiving an asthma diagnosis. It was finally understanding that my body had never betrayed me. The people who refused to listen had. And once I learned the difference, everything changed. Today, whenever someone tells me they're in pain, scared, or struggling, I don't question them. I listen, because I know exactly how it feels to beg for help while the people you love call it an act. Sometimes saving a life doesn't begin with medicine. Sometimes it begins with 4 simple words. I believe you. Asterisk, she left my apartment without another word, and as the door closed behind her, I realized something unexpected. I didn't feel angry anymore. I felt free for years. I had believed my worth depended on keeping my parents happy. Every holiday I organized, every favor I completed, every time I ignored my own pain just to avoid disappointing them, I thought I was earning their love. But lying in that hospital bed had forced me to face a truth I had avoided my entire life. Love should never require for someone to ignore their own suffering. The following weeks were quiet. I focused on my recovery, attended every follow-up appointment, and learned how to manage my condition properly. For the first time, doctors explained what was happening inside my body instead of dismissing my symptoms. Every answer they gave replaced years of confusion with understanding. Meanwhile, word about what had happened at my parents' anniversary party spread through the neighborhood. People who had witnessed everything began talking openly. Several guests admitted they had been uncomfortable when my father accused me of faking it, but no one had wanted to interfere. Now they wished they had spoken up sooner. My parents quickly realized they could no longer control the story. My mother tried posting on the neighborhood social media page, thanking everyone for their concern and calling the incident a misunderstanding. The response wasn't what she expected. Instead of agreeing with her, neighbors commented about what they had personally witnessed. They remembered hearing me say I couldn't breathe. They remembered my father telling me to stop acting. They remembered the doctor demanding someone call 911. For the first time in their lives, my parents couldn't rewrite reality. A week later, my father asked if we could meet. We sat across from each other in a small coffee shop where neither of us had ever been before. He looked exhausted. The confidence he had carried for as long as I could remember had disappeared. "I've been thinking," he said quietly. I waited. I replay that afternoon every night. He rubbed his hands together before continuing. When that doctor looked at me, his voice cracked. I've never felt so ashamed. It was the first genuine emotion I'd seen from him in years. I kept telling myself you were exaggerating because admitting something was wrong meant admitting I had ignored you before. I stayed silent. "I don't expect you to forgive me today," he continued. "Maybe not ever. But I needed you to know that I finally understand what I did." For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Finally, I looked at him. "I spent years trying to convince you that my pain was real." He nodded slowly. "I know. I don't need to convince you anymore." A tear rolled down his face. Neither of us tried to hide it. A few days later, my mother wrote me a letter. Unlike her first message, this one didn't blame stress, anxiety, or misunderstandings. She admitted she had been more worried about what people would think than about what her daughter was experiencing. She wrote, "I confused protecting my reputation with protecting my family. I see now that they are not the same thing." It wasn't a perfect apology, but it was the first honest one I had ever received. I thanked her for taking responsibility, but I also explained that rebuilding trust would take time. Trust isn't restored by a single apology. It's rebuilt through consistent actions over months and years. She understood. Over the next several months, my life slowly changed. I accepted freelance work that actually paid me instead of working for free for family members. I joined a hiking group where people encouraged each other instead of competing for attention. I decorated my apartment with plants, books, and photographs that reminded me of peaceful moments instead of painful memories. Most importantly, I stopped apologizing every time I needed help. One evening, nearly a year after the anniversary party, I received an unexpected message from Dr. Nathan Carter. "Just checking in. How are you doing?" I smiled. "Much better." A few minutes later he replied, "I'm glad, keep believing yourself." Asterisk. I read those words several times. They reminded me of the lesson that had changed everything. For years, I had believed the voices telling me I was weak, dramatic, and attention-seeking. I ignored my own instincts because the people closest to me insisted they knew me better than I knew myself. They didn't. My body had been telling the truth all along. I had simply learned not to listen. Looking back now, I don't remember my parents' anniversary party as the day everything fell apart. I remember it as the day everything finally began to come together. It was the day I stopped chasing approval from people who refused to see me. The day I started trusting my own voice. The day I realized that real love listens before it judges, believes before it doubts, and protects before it criticizes. My parents made a terrible mistake, one that nearly cost us all far more than they ever imagined. But the consequences forced every one of us to confront uncomfortable truths. They learned that reputation can never matter more than someone's well-being. I learned that boundaries aren't acts of revenge. They are acts of self-respect. Today, our relationship is different. It isn't perfect, and perhaps it never will be. But it is honest. My parents know that if I say something is wrong, they listen, they ask questions, they believe me. That change didn't happen because time healed old wounds. It happened because the truth finally became impossible to ignore. Sometimes the most important words you'll ever speak are the simplest ones. I need help. And sometimes the most powerful words another person can say in return are even simpler. I believe you. That belief can save relationships. It can restore trust, and sometimes it can even save